Welcome to the All About You podcast. My name is Sheila and I am your host. In this podcast, I invite people to tell their stories of their travels, hobbies, and passions. These podcasts are also now available on my All About You YouTube channel. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story. Welcome to the All About You podcast. And my conversation today is with Lucy, and Lucy's an artist. So Lucy, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Sheila.
So Lucy, let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
When you were a kid, were you obsessed with paints and crayons and drawing? When did your love of art begin?
Well, obsessed with paint and crayons and drawing? No. But I remember from a really early age on my bedroom floor with a whole load of stuff, having, watched Blue Peter attempting to make whatever it was they'd made that week. And I remember being kind of imagining that I was on telly, so I would give all these instructions about how to make whatever it was I was making, and then there'd be these long silences where I avidly tried to make double-sided sticky tape because Mum hadn't bought me any. Yeah, I was always really interested in art.
So how old were you then when you were recreating the Blue Peter to do with the week?
7 maybe.
Oh, okay.
8, 9, in around there. And then I kind of dabbled, Christmas presents, birthday presents. I was always making stuff, always. But it wasn't really terribly well appreciated by my parents. Yeah, later on, when it became time to sort of decide what to do, third level education and that kind of thing, I was desperate to go to art college. Desperate. And I'd been for, quite a few interviews, and I got accepted in a couple of places. One in particular, Crawford Art College in Cork, in Ireland. Yeah, I remember sitting down and having a big conversation with my dad, who told me in no uncertain terms that there was absolutely no way I was going to art college. And his words were, he basically said, "Well, do you really think you're going to make a life for yourself as an artist? Don't be ridiculous. You're going to dye your hair blue and get pregnant, and I am not paying for that." So kind of that was that was the door slammed in my face. And I went to University College Dublin, and I studied history of art. Was the closest I could get to something artistic, and Celtic archaeology and psychology.
So with that in mind then, Lucy, what did you actually want to be when you grew up?
No idea, Sheila. All I knew at about 18, 19, all I was really aware of was I was desperate to leave Ireland. Seriously desperate. And so somewhere, can't remember now how, but I managed to find a job on a summer course teaching dance in the north of Spain in a place called Izarra. Yeah, so at about, I don't know what age I was, maybe 19, I got on a plane and flew to Madrid, and then got a train up to the north of Spain, and ended up teaching dance on this summer camp and some English. The summer course was linked to a school called the English Montessori School in Madrid. And so I did that for one summer, and then a second summer. And that was the end of that, kind of tied in at the end of my degree. And I ended up coming back to stay with a friend in Madrid. And at the time, I was completely obsessed by Goya. Francisco de Goya and his black paintings. And so I was only supposed to be in Madrid for a week, and I went along to the Prado to see his black paintings, and I was horrified because they were all organised in this room dedicated to Goya, but they were out of order and they were framed. Can you imagine? I mean, these paintings were created to be part of a dining room in a really dark old house, and here they are framed in white. I was appalled, and because I was so young and I suppose had lots of ego back then, I wrote a letter to the guy in charge of the Prado, and told him who I was and where I'd come from and how disgusted I was at this exhibition, and left the forwarding address where I was staying. And he got in touch with me, and I went in and had a chat with him and told him a little bit about myself, and he invited me to talk about Goya's black paintings on a course they had, which was all about, the collections of paintings in different museums in Europe. So I did that for a while. And then, it wasn't a long time or anything, it was just 2 or 3 talks.
I mean, that's a brilliant story, Lucy. I mean, this is why I do this podcast.
Out of the blue, Sheila, honestly.
That is just phenomenal, that the fact that you took the initiative, and as you say, it wasn't an email, it was a letter with a forwarding address.
Yeah.
You actually thought, no, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah, I was appalled at the time.
I think that is a brilliant story.
But I think also back then, life was so much easier. Nowadays, if you were to write an email to this man, he'd probably never reply. Back then things were different, And then, I ended up staying in Spain, the same school that I'd done these summer courses for. One of the women in primary was pregnant, and they phoned me, and I went in for an interview. I had no teaching qualification, nothing. And this guy, Norman Rodham, asked me if I would teach year 3 primary, and I said, sure. And that was the beginning of the end. That was me becoming a teacher without I just fell into it, really.
And what about your family then? So you got on the plane and you went and you did the dancing. I mean, was your dad just like, no, come back, get a proper job, get married, produce children?
No, I think they were so shocked that I'd actually done this. And then I think maybe a year later they came to visit, and I had my flat and I had my job as a teacher, and I was super happy. And I think Mum was really upset that I'd left, and I think she still is. I think somewhere in her mind she'd very much like me to be at home, but I think she's accepted having, all these years later, she's kind of accepted that was what I was going to do. And
so you secured a job then, teaching very young kids.
I did,
art.
No, it wasn't art, it was primary school teacher.
Teaching the whole spectrum, not just
which
art.
Was insane.
Oh my God.
I made some awful mistakes.
Wow.
Awful mistakes. I remember my first year maybe teaching, or my second year, this dad came in very obstreperous and really angry, and kind of attacked me in my classroom and accused me of making the children sleep in class, and that he wasn't going to put up with this, and he wasn't going to pay good money to have his child sleep through my lessons and all this kind of thing. And so I invited him to stay in the room, and he would see what his son meant when he said that he was being asked to go to sleep. So you know what kids are like, they're all really, really loud, and especially Spanish children. And so I would stand up at the top of the class, and I'd say, okay, everybody, right, heads on desks, we're going to go to sleep, close your eyes. And they'd all put their heads on the desks and close their eyes, and I'd say, okay, so when I say wake up, you're going to get up and go to the maths corner and get your books and blah, 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 blah. And then we'll sit down and we'll start the lesson. Are you ready? Okay, everybody wake up. And then off they went. And this poor guy was mortified then and really apologetic, etc. But it was great fun, really good fun teaching children. I do love them. Truly I do, particularly young kids, because they're so open to everything. They haven't shut down in any way. They're still completely free and precocious. And
I think that
fun.
was a really good thing that relates to art, isn't it? Because
Definitely.
Kids are quite happy just to mess about, try.
Yeah.
But as adults, we're no. Even if we're learning, it's got to be perfect.
Totally. Completely.
And that just stifles our creativity.
Totally.
We're frightened of making a mess, or we haven't got the time.
Sure.
Okay, let's go on from teaching the young children at school. So what happened next then? What was the next chapter?
Well, I don't know. While I was in Madrid, I made friends with quite a few American people and some Spanish people who just happened to be actors. And they set up a company called the Transatlantic Theatre Company, and they were looking for somebody to design costumes and make sets and that kind of thing, which I adored. I loved it. And so I started doing that for a while, alongside my teaching, obviously. And then I ended up going back to England, because obviously I had to qualify at some point as a teacher. And that was kind of a rough year. I ended up in Oxford, and I did my PGCE there as a secondary art and drama teacher. And then went back to Ireland. I can't actually remember, maybe a year or two anyway. And there I rented a studio space, which is a really big thing for me, because up until then I hadn't really thought of myself as being an artist. To actually call myself that was really difficult for me. I don't know what it meant. It was scary for me.
I totally relate to that, because people say, oh, so you're a podcaster. Oh, no, I'm not a podcaster. Well, what do you do? Well, I do a podcast. Well, you're a podcaster.
But I'm not one. Yeah.
And it's a bit like, what do we actually have to do to define ourselves as an artist or a podcaster? So it's quite interesting, isn't it? We're a bit loath to give ourselves this label.
Definitely. I don't know. I think for me, it was that I really deep down in myself for years, I carried this feeling that I hadn't been to art college, I hadn't trained, wasn't sure if I could draw really, all these doubts in myself, and it really damaged my confidence, I think. And so it took me a very long time to kind of face my fears about what I was missing as an artist, and just go ahead and get out there and say, yeah, I am, and this is what I do, and if you don't like it, that's completely fine by me, but I am proud of where I've got to.
We often are measuring ourselves against somebody else.
Oh, definitely.
I mean,
constantly.
In the world of podcasting, there's people that have got millions of subscribers, they're making lots of money, they've got their own XYZ, and you think, okay, I'm only starting. It's a very small podcast. We've been going for a year.
Which is amazing, Sheila.
Well, I think it's amazing, and I'm beginning to realise it's amazing. When I thought, I've done over 70 podcasts. They say most podcasters will stop after 4 or 5. They've got their first 2 or 3 podcasts. They do those. A couple more. I've run out of ideas now or something. Yeah. And you think, okay, I'm not up there with some of these mega podcasters, but I'm still going after a year, and I've got no intention of stopping because it's just the best thing ever.
I think it's when you find something that you really love to do, or that's what art is for me. I just love doing it. I really do. I love it. I mean, I'm lucky enough now. I've got a studio at home, away from the house, which means I'm not bothered every second by my husband or my daughter or what have you. Although I love them. But I have to set an alarm, so that I remember to go and pick up my daughter. Otherwise, I lose all sense of time. Wow. All sense of time. I'm not very good at the marketing side of things, though.
Well, that's a whole new ballgame.
I find that really hard.
Technology and whatever you do, you've got to have a website, you've got to have Instagram, you've got to Facebook posts and Insta posts,
and to sell yourself. That's very difficult.
I mean, I always say I need to employ a 12-year-old and just get them to do it.
Totally.
And I think this is for people of our age, isn't it? You like to do your art, but you don't want to do the marketing.
Exactly.
I love doing the podcast, and I'm learning, social media, because apparently you have to have it. Yeah. But I think this is it. We all just need to employ a 12-year-old.
Totally.
They'll go, okay, I'll just do it. You just do the bit you can do, and I'll do everything else. So we're digressing here, Lucy. So let's go back then. So you did your year or two in Ireland.
Yeah, and there I rented a studio with another lady, a woman called Laura O'Hagan, who's a very famous mosaic artist. And she obviously saw something in what I was producing. At that stage, I was making sculptures from branches and using a lot of silk paper to sort of cover them. The idea being that when they were lit from the inside, it was kind of almost like an X-ray. Wow. That you could see all of this structure beneath this very delicate exterior, and she asked a lady from the Arts Council in Ireland to come and have a look at what I was doing. I mean, it was amazing for me anyway. Ireland is a terrific place if you're artistically minded, and they gave me an opportunity to exhibit. They put me on a whole stack of courses to kind of forward my ideas into something that would be saleable. But all of this came with a kind of I had to sign a contract with them that said that I would stay in the country for 7 years, and I couldn't do it.
I mean,
I was
7
missing
years
Spain so much, and it
is
was
a long time
huge.
to commit to something, isn't it?
Huge. So that's what sent me back to Spain. I ended up back in Spain, back in Madrid. I wasn't happy. I was teaching again, but it was still primary. There wasn't space in the school that I'd been in to take over an art position. And I ended up going to Granada, and I spent 2 or 3 years there working with a friend of mine who'd opened a snowboard shop. And so I did all of the logos for the t-shirts and sweatshirts and designed the shop for him, and that was good fun for me. And then when that was all over, I was completely bored stupid, because halfway up a mountain with a snowboard is not me.
I'm just thinking about this 7-year contract. I mean, you were offered so much, as you say, all the courses, but they wanted you to commit for 7 years. That must have been a decision that kept you up for sleepless nights.
It was kind of a gut reaction. It was like, I cannot be tied like that to a place I'm not sure about living in for that amount of time.
Because it sounds great, and maybe if it had been a year, then absolutely, but 7 years is a long time.
I mean, I still do. You know, when things are difficult here, I often think back, my goodness, I wonder what would have happened if.
But if you'd gone left instead of right, absolutely. Yeah,
but you can't think that way.
So working and designing the logos and the shop for snowboarding.
Yep. And then what happened? I went to Italy for a year, and I used my abilities in mosaic to work on the piazza in the centre of Siena for a couple of months, which killed my knees because I spent the entire time kneeling down, putting tiny little pieces of ceramic into a ground.
So you can go there and say, I actually put these bits. I mean, you've left
Kinda
your
cool.
mark there well and truly.
Yeah. And then I ended up in Valencia. I'm not quite sure how. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper. Somebody wanted an art teacher, and I got a phone call. I think I sent a CV, and I got a phone call from this lady, Tracy Ibbison, who wanted to know could I come the next day. And so I packed myself up and arrived in Valencia. Yeah, that was 2003, I want to say, somewhere around there. And that was the beginning of teaching at Cambridge House.
So that's where we met when you were teaching there. Yeah. So you were teaching did you go straight into secondary?
Yeah, straight into secondary, straight into position of head of art, because the lady that was teaching there before me, Diane, she got very ill and she couldn't continue working. I took over her job, which was terrifying at the time.
You were back in Spain, so you were happy. You were happy because you were back.
Very happy. I know, very happy. And very happy in Cambridge House. It was a wonderful place to work back then. Really was. Very few children. I think I had a class size of about 21 or 23 and around there. Yeah, and it was a wonderful place to work. And I loved the kids. The kids were amazing.
So very different teaching art to secondary school kids too, because this is when they're doing their final exams in art as well. So we get
and A level and
serious
everything.
stuff.
Yeah, but it was lovely to work along them, and I think for me anyway, the whole idea of teaching art, what makes me happy is watching a person tap in, to what they want to say and finding a medium or a means in which to express themselves. I think that's, in a nutshell, that's what really interests me. And so if along the way they manage to do really well in their exams, wonderful. But yeah, that's what really makes me tick, I suppose.
So let's move on then. So you left Cambridge House, and what was your plans?
I didn't really have a plan. I think I was just really burnt out at the time. I mean, I'd been there 16 years or something like that, and I just had enough. And I'd had a child in the meantime, my daughter Evie, and it was all just getting too much. I had no time ever to paint, no time to create myself, and I just ended up burning out really. And so I left in 2018 with absolutely no idea how I was going to make enough money, nothing. And I ended up working with a friend of mine who has a kindergarten, and I did some art in English for him. And then I was teaching a couple of theatre classes in English for children. And I was teaching some art classes to young children, and loved it, because all that pressure of having to, prepare children for exams and all of that was gone, and I could, provide them with an environment where they got to really explore and be creative,
So you got the best bit of
Definitely.
Working with the kids.
Yeah, and it left, obviously it freed me up way more, and I could start painting again, because I hadn't done that, And I think when coronavirus hit, although it was awful and financial suicide for me and a million other people, that confinement really got me going, because I kind of lived in my studio, and I put together a couple of collections of work and began to feel more confident about what I was capable of. Yeah, that's kind of it,
So now you've got your own studio then, as you say, separate from the house.
Yeah, and I work a lot with acrylic paints. At the moment I'm obsessed with fluid art painting, so that's when you mix acrylic paint with water, and you thin it down and thin it down and thin it down to a point where it's, it can really flow, and you apply colours on a canvas. It's fascinating to me, and you use your breath and blow the paint over the canvas, and it's because of the different pigments and thicknesses of each colour. Some paint sinks and some paint floats, so you get these amazing cells of colour that happen. I love it because you can't plan anything. You've got to go with the flow. I think that's what excites me
and
about
see
it.
how it turns out. So you're painting, but you're doing jewellery making as well?
Yeah, well, the fluid art, you see, because a lot of that paint, I hate waste, and paint is expensive, and because that paint sort of flows off the canvas, the puddles of paint that are left, I have like a paint on top of a plastic base, and those puddles of paint you can then blow, and they create more amazing designs, and they dry as a skin, like acrylic is plastic based, so they dry as a plastic skin, and those I then use to make jewellery. I started selling them in a market called Los Jardines de Tato in Goya, and at the moment I'm talking to people in La Tapineria here in Valencia, and see if I can't get a stall here too and sell some more.
Has the jewellery become a byproduct of
Definitely,
this?
yeah. And it's popular because you can, it's not crazily expensive. Yeah, it's a good thing to do, because, it's easy to set up a stall. Lots of people seem to really like it. It's become quite popular, so I'm really happy about that.
So you're in a good place now. You've got your studio. It's away from the house, so you do have a bit of I'm going to be creative as opposed to cooking dinner and looking after your family.
Yeah.
And then you've now got the painting and you've got the jewellery making going.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else in the back of your mind? You've probably got lots of projects in your mind.
I do. And one of them, I started working with a place called Talleres Artesanos in La Eliana. The owner is a fantastic woman called Graciela. And I went to see her last year with this idea of organising a course for adults called Ignite Your Creativity. because I see all of these women and older people around me who have never had the chance to explore what creative stuff is going on inside them. And so I wanted to put together a course for them specifically, where there's no pressure to produce something perfect. It's completely free. They're in an atmosphere that's non-threatening, and they can explore and play and learn how to do all of that again as a child would, exactly the same, and discover what have they been put here to say, and find a medium that makes them happy to explore and express themselves with.
I mean, you can definitely put me down on that course, Lucy.
Oh,
because
it's great fun, Sheila. It really, really is.
I think the thing is, once we leave school, you know, we have art classes at school, and mine were a complete disaster. Absolutely hated it. Would I say I'm artistic? Absolutely not. But Spain is always a little bit behind the UK, and I remember when I got into the colouring books, I absolutely adored it. Like you know, I'm just going to colour for 10 minutes and like an hour
2
later.
hours go by, yeah.
And then I thought, okay, let's have a little mess around with some watercolour paints and some watercolour pencils. And, you know, for a couple of euros, you can get us a few pencils and watercolour paper. And again, watching a YouTube video and having a go. I think this is the thing, as we get older, we think, oh God, you know, I'm not creative, I haven't got the tools, I've got to go to a studio, I've got to spend this money on a teacher. No, just get hold of some crayons and a piece of paper.
Everybody is an artist.
But why are we so fearful of being artistic?
I think it's the same as it was for me. I mean, I didn't call myself an artist for years because of this idea that in order to be an artist, you must, you know, study art, and you must be able to draw.
Deadly serious.
Absolutely, and you must be able to talk about the theories in your work and what everything means and the symbolism. And I don't know, I think it's this image that we have of what an artist should be, and I think it's dead, actually. I don't think it exists really nowadays.
I think it's interesting when we sort of, you know, or for me personally, when I go to an art exhibition or an art gallery, I like to look at something and go, okay, yeah, that's a nice picture of a house and a garden, or a portrait of a lady or something, or even, as I would say, splodges of different colours.
Yeah.
But then when you go to and there's like a mattress hanging on the wall with the springs coming through, and then there's some jargon, oh, he was going through his XYZ period, I just think, dear God, I could produce that. Does that make me an artist?
Yeah, I know where you're coming from.
You know, we can look back and we can talk about Goya, Matisse and Picasso. I mean, I'm just pulling names out the air here. But these people often have a particular style.
Definitely.
And I went to an art exhibition of Goya, and I just thought, oh my God, I have come out of here so depressed because the art was all death and destruction. And as you say, it wasn't looking at a beautiful garden with flowers and stuff like that. So, you know, art is many different things to many people. But when you see these crazy things hanging from the ceiling, and I remember going in there and going, oh, make sure you don't trip over the ventilation fan. And somebody said, oh, no, that's part of the exhibition.
Yeah,
I think like, it's... You are joking. Yeah. I mean, it's the emperor's clothes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it can become very cerebral.
Yes.
And I think, that's not a place I'm comfortable in. I really think art is a way of expressing what you have inside, the emotions that you're going through caused by whatever, coronavirus being optimum at the moment, obviously. Yeah, for me, it's about freeing the feelings I have inside, giving them a place to go, and making something I consider to be beautiful out of those sometimes negative thoughts, sometimes fear, sometimes anger, sometimes just an appraisal of beauty.
And art is often a good way to try and get things out of your head, even if you haven't. It's like doodling, isn't it? People will doodle when they're thinking through a problem, or often art is used for children to express their feelings when they haven't got a vocabulary.
Yeah, it's like psychotherapy for me. and that's the way I like to teach. That's what interests me.
So Lucy, let's have some advice from you about people listening to this podcast who are probably, I can't draw a straight line, I'm not creative. What can you say that is relatively easy for them to do and just to sort of produce something? No one's got to look at it, it hasn't got to be put in a frame and place of honour.
I think for anybody out there who's feeling a bit frustrated or just have lots of feelings they need to get rid of, I think you need to get back in touch with who you are and that inner child that you carry deep down inside, and give them a chance to come out and play. And stop fearing the world. Nobody's judging. Everybody can make marks. Everybody can play with colours, and it doesn't really matter what the end result is. I think it's the process of creating that allows that inner child in every person to come out and to have a chance to explore and create and become part of the person. I think we're all so worried about being seen, especially somewhere like Spain. Everybody's, very dressed up. They seem to wear this kind of suit of armour, and they have to look a certain way and behave a certain way, and it stops that inner child from having a place in your life. And I think if you can get in touch with that little person inside you, it makes you happier. It makes you more content deep down in yourself. So for somebody out there, buy some colours. Buy some colours and a couple of brushes and some nice thick watercolour paper and make a mess.
And just go for it.
Just go for it. Make a mess. I like to do one of the classes that's really popular with adults that I do is to find some music that doesn't have words. No, there are no vocals, and allow the music to inspire the gestures and the movements that you're making with paint. Even something like oil pastels, crayons. A nice piece of music with loads of drums, and you allow yourself to just let go. And some of those pieces can be beautiful, really beautiful.
I mean, the thing is, nobody's going to judge it.
Absolutely
not.
You
don't have to show it to anybody. You can do it, on the back of an envelope. You haven't got to have all the gear.
No,
absolutely
use your
not. Children's crayons or colour pencils. Yeah, and just
totally.
I think it's that freedom, isn't it? Giving yourself permission for 10 minutes. I'm going to sit down, get my kids' colouring pencils,
and have some fun,
and just see what I can knock out.
And if you've got children, you're winning. You just get in there with them.
Children would love you for doing that.
Get in there with them and enjoy it. And it's lovely for them too, to see an adult having fun and making a mess. Yeah, it's really good for your health. Well, takes away wrinkles.
Well, anything that does that is absolutely brilliant. Lucy, thank you so much for being a guest. It's been brilliant hearing your story.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Inspiring us all as adults to not worry what anybody thinks. You don't have to spend a fortune. Just nick your child's colouring pencils and a back of an envelope and give it a go.
Definitely. Definitely. Oh, thank you so much, Sheila.
You're very welcome, Lucy. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe on whatever platform you are using. It is free, and if you would like to tell your story, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.